A family flees in terror. In the dead of a frigid winter night, a family of 5 flees their dream home in suburban Amityville, New York. Doors are left flung open, lights blazing in the windows as George and Kathy Lutz pile their 3 children into the car. They leave everything behind: clothes, furniture, cherished toys, and speed away, vowing never to spend another night at 112 Ocean Avenue. They claim something evil drove them out after just 28 days of mounting terror. Only a year earlier, this same house was the scene of an unspeakable crime. 6 members of the DeFeo family were found murdered in their beds, all killed by the eldest son, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., who later claimed he heard voices urging him to do it. Now, the Lutz family's shocking escape has everyone asking, did a dark supernatural force haunt the house on Ocean Avenue? And could it still be lurking inside? Before we continue, if you enjoy chilling real-life horror stories, please like this video, share it with fellow horror fans, and subscribe for more investigations into the unknown. Now, let's unlock the secrets of the Amityville Horror House. History of 112 Ocean Avenue. The story begins with an ordinary house on Long Island that would soon earn an extraordinary reputation. The home at 112 Ocean Avenue, later infamously known as the Amityville Horror House, was built in the 1920s as a large Dutch colonial, complete with a distinctive gambrel roof and windows that eerily resembled eyes. The land had been farmland owned by one of Amityville's founding families until 1924, when it was sold and a spacious 5-bedroom house was constructed on the lot in 1925. John and Catherine Moynihan and their children were the first to live in the new home, enjoying its serene location by the Amityville Creek. After the Moynihans passed away, their adult daughter inherited the house and lived there with her own family until 1960. That year, the property changed hands to a new owner, John Riley, and his wife. The Rileys' tenure was unremarkable, no strange incidents, just normal life in a quiet town. However, due to personal issues, the couple eventually divorced. The Rileys decided to sell the house after only 5 years. On June 28, 1965, Ronald DeFeo Sr. and his wife Louise bought 112 Ocean Avenue and moved in with their growing family. To neighbors, the DeFeo home seemed pleasant enough. The family of 7, parents and 5 children, lived in the lovely riverside house for 9 years, but behind closed doors, trouble was brewing. The DeFeo household was troubled by violent arguments and an abusive father, creating a tense, volatile environment. This tension built to a horrific climax on November 13, 1974. In the early morning hours, 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. took a high-powered rifle and murdered his entire immediate family as they slept, shooting his mother, his father, and his 4 younger siblings, ranging in age from 9 to 18, in their beds. The brutality of the crime stunned the nation. Butch DeFeo initially told police he heard disembodied voices that drove him to kill, a claim that added a sinister twist to the murders. He later gave conflicting accounts of that night, changing his story multiple times while in custody. Ultimately, DeFeo was convicted on 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life terms in prison. He remained behind bars until his death in 2021, leaving the true motive for his heinous act shrouded in mystery. In the wake of the massacre, 112 Ocean Avenue sat empty for over a year. The once proud Dutch colonial was now a notorious crime scene, a place of tragedy that many believed was tainted by the violence that occurred within its walls. In December 1975, just 13 months after the murders, the house was put on the market at a bargain price. George and Kathleen Lutz, a young married couple, jumped at the chance to buy it. They knew about the DeFeo murders, but decided that such a beautiful house at $80,000 was an opportunity too good to pass up. George, Kathy, and Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage, 9-year-old Daniel, 7-year-old Christopher, and 5-year-old Missy, moved in right before Christmas, thrilled to start a new life in the spacious home. They brought along their crossbreed dog, Harry, and all their belongings, hopeful that the house's tragic past was behind it. Sadly for the Lutz family, the true horror was just beginning. Paranormal events and hauntings. From the moment the Lutz family unpacked, subtle warning signs began to surface. On their first day in the house, as friends helped them move in, Father Ray Pecoraro, a local Catholic priest, arrived to bless the home as a favor to Kathy. While sprinkling holy water in one upstairs bedroom, which had belonged to the murdered DeFeo boys, the priest suddenly felt an icy chill and heard a loud masculine voice growl directly in his ear, "Get out." Startled and shaken, Father Pecoraro urged the Lutzes not to use that particular room as a bedroom. As the priest left, he did not tell George and Kathy the full detail of what he'd heard, but they noticed him looking disturbed. Later, the priest reportedly developed flu-like symptoms and inexplicable blisters on his hands, as if he'd been slapped or burned after visiting the house. It was an omen of what was to come. In the weeks that followed, the Lutz family experienced a barrage of strange and terrifying occurrences. At first, it was little things. Mysterious cold drafts would chill them in spots of the house with no open windows. The family dog would bark at empty air or refuse to go into certain rooms. George, usually a practical ex-Marine, became increasingly unsettled. He found himself waking up at 3:15 a.m. every night, almost like clockwork, the very time he later learned that the DeFeo murders had occurred. Each time he awoke, the house was deathly quiet, yet he felt an intangible sense of dread, as if something invisible were stirring in those witching hours before dawn. Soon, the phenomena escalated beyond mere feelings. The family would awaken to the sound of doors slamming in the night, but upon investigation, no one else was there. George would step out of bed and find the front door wide open, even though he was certain he had locked it. Unexplained odors wafted through the rooms. At times, the stench of excrement or rotting meat would appear suddenly and then vanish just as quickly. Kathy began having horrific nightmares about the murders, describing scenes she had never personally witnessed. She would wake up screaming, feeling as if she'd been touched or even embraced by an unseen force. In broad daylight, they discovered a strange viscous substance oozing from keyholes and creeping down the walls, a green slime that neither of them could identify. No source for the slime was ever found, and it would appear and disappear intermittently, defying explanation.
The paranormal activity grew more violent as days passed. The Lutz children, Daniel and Christopher, were dragged to the center of their beds by invisible hands and then levitated, their beds slamming up and down according to their terrifying recollections. One night, George was startled to see his wife Kathy levitating above their bed, her body rising and swaying as she slept before crashing back onto the mattress when he cried out. On another occasion, Kathy's face mysteriously transformed. Deep lines and a grimace of an old hag overtook her features briefly, according to the book's account, only to fade back to normal moments later. Strange noises were constant. The sound of a marching band or loud music would explode in the living room, only to stop abruptly when someone went to investigate. 12-year-old Daniel's bedroom window smashed his hand one day, crushing his fingers, but by some miracle, none were broken. A heavy garage door opened and closed by itself repeatedly. In the kitchen, a sharp knife that had been left on the counter was later found on the floor, as if some force had flung it from the counter at head height. Perhaps the most frightening of all the Lutz's experiences was embodied by their daughter Missy's new imaginary friend. Missy, just 5 years old, began talking to an unseen entity she called Jody. Jody, Missy said, was a pig-like creature who could present itself as a large pig or sometimes as a small child. One night, George went outside to check on the boathouse, a nightly habit since it seemed the boathouse door kept opening on its own. Peering back at the house, George was startled to see 2 red gleaming eyes staring at him from Missy's bedroom window, eyes that looked inhuman, like those of a pig or wild animal. Rushing upstairs to comfort his daughter, George found Missy fast asleep, and a child-sized rocking chair in her room was slowly rocking back and forth, untouched. The malevolence in the house seemed to target George in particular. His personality changed over those 28 days. He became sullen, quick to anger, and obsessed with the fireplace. Despite the heating system working, George could not seem to get warm. He constantly built roaring fires in the fireplace, burning log after log, yet he would still shiver as if something ice-cold seeped into his bones. Kathy noticed the change in her husband and grew fearful of his growing fixation on the fire in the late-night hours. On a few occasions, George said he heard drumming noises or what sounded like chants coming from the basement. When he would rush down the stairs, he'd find the basement empty and silent, except perhaps for the vague smell of perfume or incense in the air, which would dissipate as quickly as it came. By the end of the 4th week, the Lutz family was at a breaking point. The relentless incidents, slamming doors, vile odors, voices in the dead of night, objects moving on their own, had driven them to constant fear and exhaustion. The final night in the house, January 13th, 1976, was the worst of all. Though the family has never fully detailed what happened that night, saying it was too frightening to recall in full, it's said that a terrible crescendo of activity forced their hand. Walls vibrated and banged, a dark hooded figure was glimpsed on the stairs, and the family's young boys were terrorized by something unseen in their bedroom, leaving them screaming in the middle of the night. Early the next morning, January 14th, 1976, the Lutzes decided they had endured enough. They fled the house in a rush, barely stopping to pick up a few clothes and essentials. They left plates on the table, food in the fridge, lights on, and never moved back in. In just 28 days, this ordinary family home had seemingly broken them with its onslaught of unexplainable horror.
Eyewitness testimonies and effects on the family. In the aftermath, George and Kathy Lutz were absolutely convinced that their house was haunted by a dark, possibly demonic force. They have consistently stood by their story. In fact, both George and Kathy took a lie detector test about their experiences, and they passed, showing no signs of deception. For the rest of their lives, the couple maintained that everything they reported was true. Quote, "If we had tried to perpetrate some kind of hoax, I think we would have been much surer of when and how things happened because we would have been inventing them," George Lutz argued, pushing back on those who doubted the story. Kathy and George would recount their month of horror in interviews with unwavering sincerity before Kathy's untimely death from pneumonia in 2004 and George's passing in 2006. George, especially, gave detailed descriptions of what he remembered from those nights. In a 2002 interview, he recalled the disturbances vividly. There were odors in the house that came and went. There were sounds. The front door would slam shut in the middle of the night. I couldn't get warm in the house for many days, he said. He described waking at 3:15 a.m. night after night and sensing he was not alone in the dark. George also claimed he personally saw paranormal manifestations, including witnessing his wife levitate and move across the bed one night as an invisible force dragged her. According to George, the experiences were beyond anything a normal family could or would fabricate, and he resented skeptics who dismissed their trauma. Our critics are people who've never been in the house. No one who was ever in the house who investigated it ever called it a hoax, he insisted in another interview. The Lutz children, who were very young during the incident, have had mixed recollections in adulthood. Daniel Lutz, who was 9 at the time, has stood by the core of the story and how it affected him. He vividly remembers the terror of that house. "My brother and myself shared a levitation experience in our beds," Daniel told a reporter in 2012. "We both woke up and our headboards and footboards were smashing each other and banging off the ceiling." According to Daniel, the haunting was real and had lasting consequences. He says the house ruined his life, that he still has nightmares about it to this day. Daniel's younger sister, Missy, was too little to recall much, but Daniel claims that Missy truly believed she had a friend named Jody in the house and would talk of the red-eyed pig creature as if it were real. On the other hand, Christopher Quarantino, formerly Lutz, who was 7 during the Amityville stay, has been more skeptical as an adult.
He acknowledges that something strange happened, but believes his stepfather, George, exaggerated their experiences for effect. In a 2005 interview, Christopher said the events were blown up to the point of fiction and that many details in Jay Anson's book were false or hyperbolic. Notably, Christopher has suggested that George's interest in the occult might have played a role. He claimed George dabbled in transcendental meditation and attempted to summon supernatural forces, which, in Christopher's view, could have invited whatever evil resided in the house. This allegation has fueled speculation that the haunting was not purely spontaneous, although it remains unproven. No discussion of eyewitness accounts is complete without revisiting Ronald Butch DeFeo's initial claim that he heard disembodied voices in the house commanding him to kill. While DeFeo later changed his story multiple times and even denied the paranormal element, his early statements gave many people pause. Could the evil presence in that house have influenced him to massacre his family? DeFeo's own defense attorney, William Weber, once tried to use an insanity defense by drawing on the demonic voices narrative. Though that didn't hold up in court, the idea of a curse or demonic influence in the home lingered in the public imagination. The priest who blessed the house, Father Pecoraro, never fully went public with his experiences. In fact, he was given a pseudonym in the book. But it's known from George's testimony that Pecoraro experienced the chilling voice and subsequent illness. That a man of God felt something so malign in the home added weight to the Lutz's claims.
For the Lutz family, the Amityville ordeal left deep psychological scars. They had fled the house, but for years afterward they were haunted by fear, ridicule, and relentless media attention. Neighbors and co-workers were skeptical. Some accused them of making it all up for money. The Lutzes had to defend their reputations as much as their story. The children endured teasing at school once their story became famous. In fact, the pressure was so intense that Christopher eventually changed his last name from Lutz to distance himself from the notoriety. The family even fell into disagreements and legal disputes with each other in later years over how their story was used in movies and books. What everyone agrees on is that something extraordinary happened in that house during those 28 days. Whether it was objectively paranormal or a collective psychological breakdown under stress, the Lutz family truly believed they experienced a horror beyond this world. Investigations and media frenzy. After the Lutz family's abrupt departure made headlines, 112 Ocean Avenue became the focus of intense interest. Could this suburban home truly be haunted by demonic forces, or was it all an elaborate hoax? To find out, various investigators, both professional and self-styled, descended on the house. The most famous of these were Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators who had looked into many high-profile hauntings. Their case files would later inspire the Conjuring films. In late February 1976, a TV news crew from Channel 5 in New York arranged a psychic investigation of the Amityville house and invited the Warrens to assist. The Lutzes, having sworn never to set foot in the house again, declined to go back for the investigation. George Lutz met Ed and Lorraine Warren at a pizza parlor nearby, gave them the house keys and pointed them to the property, but refused to detail what he and his family had encountered, wanting the investigators to form their own impressions. On a chilly night in March 1976, Ed and Lorraine Warren entered the empty house on Ocean Avenue along with a small group that included the reporter, a local psychic, and a professional photographer. Almost immediately, they sensed they were not alone. In the basement, Ed Warren felt an overwhelming force hit him. Later, he described the sensation. "I felt as though I was underneath a waterfall. That's how terrific the pressure was on my head and shoulders, forcing me down to the floor," he recalled. Ed felt a crushing weight pinning him and a tingling, electrified sensation all over, as if a static charge was crawling on his skin. At one point, Ed said it felt like somebody had taken a hot towel and dropped it over my face. I couldn't breathe. He quickly used religious provocation, commanding any spirit in the house to reveal itself. Ed later claimed that this provoked a dangerous presence in the basement, something he believed was demonic. Meanwhile, Lorraine Warren wandered into the second-floor landing and was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. As a clairvoyant, Lorraine reported a psychic impression of a dark, angry presence.
In one bedroom, the same room where the priest had heard "Get out," Lorraine felt a spirit of evil so powerful that she pleaded to leave immediately. She would later state that she had a terrifying vision of bodies on the floor and felt a pressure so intense that she herself levitated a few inches off the ground while praying. "If you gave me $1 billion, I wouldn't go in that house again," Lorraine said years later, calling the Amityville case horrible, 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 and describing 112 Ocean Avenue as no ordinary haunted house. On a scale of 1 to 10, this was a 10. During that night's investigation, the Warrens and the crew attempted to provoke and document the haunting. They conducted seances and tried to communicate with whatever lurked there. While no entities visibly materialized during their stay, one piece of potential evidence did emerge. The photographer, Gene Campbell, had set up an automatic camera on the second floor to snap infrared photos throughout the night. Weeks later, as the team reviewed the developed photos, they found one image that has since become legendary. In it, a young boy with glowing white eyes peers out of a doorway on the second floor. The boy appears to be standing partially behind the banister, looking directly at the camera with a pale, lifeless face. This eerie photo, now known as the Amityville Ghost Boy, was revealed to the public in 1979 on The Merv Griffin Show by George Lutz himself. Many believe the photo shows the ghost of 9-year-old John Matthew DeFeo, the youngest DeFeo child who was murdered in the house. The image's impact on the paranormal community was huge, often cited as photographic evidence that the Amityville house truly had something supernatural within it. However, skeptics have offered a more mundane explanation. They suggest the ghost boy was actually one of the investigators, a man named Paul Bartz, who was photographed kneeling and looking toward the camera. The argument is that his eyes only appear white and glowing because of the infrared film and reflection, and that he happened to resemble a small child due to the camera angle. To this day, debate rages over the Ghost Boy photo. Is it a genuine apparition caught on film or just an odd trick of photography? The answer remains tantalizingly elusive, much like the truth of the haunting itself. As news of the Warrens' investigation spread, public interest in the Amityville Horror exploded. The Lutz family story was picked up by writer Jay Anson, who compiled the Lutz's personal tapes and notes, some 45 hours of recorded testimony, into a book. In September 1977, Anson's book The Amityville Horror, A True Story, hit bookstores, and it became a massive bestseller. Readers were enthralled and terrified by what was presented as the true account of a family haunted out of their home by demons. The book detailed even more sensational incidents than the Lutzes had publicly described, and its cover boldly labeled it a true story, which only amped up the intrigue and controversy. Not surprisingly, Hollywood soon came knocking. In 1979, the Amityville Horror feature film was released, turning the story into a pop culture phenomenon. The image of the evil house with its quarter-moon eye windows became iconic. The film's success spawned a flurry of sequels and spin-offs in the 1980s and beyond. Over the years, at least 15 movies would carry the Amityville name, including a 2005 remake and countless low-budget offshoots, solidifying the saga as a permanent fixture in the horror genre. Documentaries, TV specials, and dramatized series followed too. Even today, new projects continue. In 2025, a high-profile director was reportedly developing yet another Amityville movie. However, with fame came intense skepticism and scrutiny. Journalists and paranormal investigators began digging into the facts, and some inconsistencies emerged. Notably, William E. Weber, the attorney who had represented Ronald DeFeo Jr., came forward in 1979 with a bombshell claim. He and the Lutzes had concocted the whole haunting story over several bottles of wine. Weber said that in early 1976, while discussing the DeFeo case with George and Kathy, they collectively created this horror story as a scheme, perhaps with the idea of securing a book or movie deal. He even asserted that some of the more fantastical elements were his suggestions. For example, Weber claims it was he who told George about a cat nicknamed Pig in the neighborhood, which then morphed into the demonic pig Jody in the Lutz story. These admissions, of course, cast a long shadow of doubt over the Lutz's tale. George Lutz countered that Weber was twisting the truth because he was angry the Lutzes cut him out of the book deal. In fact, Weber and the Lutzes had been in a legal dispute over the story's rights. The Lutzes said Weber was retaliating and their experiences were absolutely not fabricated for profit. "I'm sure that the Lutzes believe what they told me to be true," author Anson said when pressed, maintaining that he believed the family believed their own story. Adding fuel to the fire, the next family to own the house, Jim and Barbara Cromartie, publicly denounced the haunting as a hoax. The Cromarties had purchased 112 Ocean Avenue in March 1977 after the Lutz's mortgage defaulted. The Lutz family had officially returned the house to the bank just months after fleeing. The Cromarties moved into a media frenzy. Tourists and onlookers swarmed the street, hoping for a glimpse of the Amityville Horror house. Frustrated by the constant attention and skeptical of the lurid claims, the Cromarties held a press conference in 1979 to clear the air. They flat out stated, "The quiet village of Amityville has been made infamous by a hoax," calling the Lutz haunting story a novel and lies that exploited a tragedy. Barbara Cromartie insisted everything was a hoax when speaking to People magazine years later. Her husband, James, quipped that nothing weird ever happened except for people coming by because of the book and the movie. The Cromarties even filed a lawsuit against George and Kathy Lutz, Jay Anson, and the publishers of the Amityville Horror, seeking damages for invasion of privacy and fraud. The case was settled out of court with terms undisclosed. As part of trying to reclaim their peaceful life, the Cromarties changed the house's address. 112 Ocean Avenue became 108 Ocean Avenue, and eventually remodeled its famous eye-like windows into a different shape, hoping to discourage sightseers. Despite their efforts, the legend of the Amityville Horror kept growing, and the public remained fascinated by the possibility that the story might be true after all. Through all the back and forth between believers and skeptics, the Amityville case became the touchstone in debates about the paranormal. Paranormal researchers who supported the Lutzes could point to the Warrens' testimony, the priest's encounter, and the consistency of the Lutz family's account. They argue that the lie detector tests, the genuine fear exhibited by the family, and the eerie coincidences, like George's 3:15 a.m. wake-ups matching the murder time, all support the haunting's authenticity. Skeptics, however, have plenty of ammunition. No subsequent residents experienced anything remotely similar. Many of the book's claims, like damage to locks and windows or cloven hoofprints in the snow, were disproven or uncorroborated by investigators. And, of course, Weber's admission and the profit motive cast doubt on the entire saga. The Amityville Horror had become as much a media circus and legal battle as it was a ghost story. Yet, despite the fierce criticism, the tale endures, both because of and in spite of the controversy. As Ed Warren famously said regarding Amityville, "People can choose to believe it or not, but it's something I'll never forget. This was a case that still haunts us." And indeed, Ed and Lorraine stood by their findings until their dying days, considering Amityville one of the most malevolent hauntings they ever encountered. Legacy and lingering mystery. It has now been decades since the Lutz family ran out of 112 Ocean Avenue in terror, yet the legend of the Amityville Horror lives on in our collective imagination. The case's legacy is enormous. It practically defined the modern image of a haunted house in popular culture. Best-selling books, a blockbuster film franchise, and numerous documentaries have kept the story in the public eye. The very name Amityville has become synonymous with ghostly terror and demonic hauntings. Tourists still occasionally drive down that quiet street in Amityville, hoping to catch a glimpse of the house, though its appearance and address have changed and the homeowners fiercely guard their privacy. The Amityville Horror also left a mark on the real estate world. Every time the house is sold, its notorious reputation followed. In 2017, the house was put on the market and eventually sold to a new family for $605,000, which was reportedly over $200,000 below the asking price, a likely consequence of its dark past making buyers hesitant. Even with renovations and the passage of time, the question lingers: would you live in the Amityville house?
For the families who lived there after 1976, the answer turned out to be yes, and with no reported supernatural incidents. After the Cromartys left in 1987, another couple bought the home and spent years there raising their kids without any horror, even renovating parts of the house to make it their own. One subsequent owner, Peter O'Neill, replaced the quarter-moon windows and filled in the backyard swimming pool that the DeFeo children once enjoyed. He and his wife Jean lived in the house for a decade, 1987 to 1997, and later said it was a lovely home. "I loved it. It was a beautiful home," Jean remarked, saying she never experienced anything remotely strange there. The next owner, Brian Wilson, who bought it in 1997, also reported no ghosts, though he did invest heavily in modernizing the property. In fact, none of the owners after the Lutz family have publicly said they witnessed any paranormal activity in the house. This mundane reality has led many to conclude the haunting was indeed a hoax or a product of overactive imaginations. And yet, some locals and longtime observers aren't so sure the house is completely free of ghosts. "I don't discount the possibility," said Fran, a neighbor who has lived in Amityville for years, when asked if the house could still be haunted. After all, the history of 112 Ocean Avenue is undeniably bloody and tragic. If any place could leave a spiritual stain, one might think a home where a family was murdered in their sleep would qualify. The Amityville story's enduring appeal likely lies in that very uncertainty. It sits at the crossroads of true crime and the supernatural, touching on our deepest fears. A beautiful suburban home turned into a battleground between an ordinary family and, supposedly, the forces of darkness. It's the ultimate nightmare scenario. The case raised many unsettling questions that still provoke debate. Was there genuinely an evil entity in that house, possibly awakened by the violence of the DeFeo murders? Or was the evil something within the family's own psyche, financial stress, personal demons, or suggestibility that snowballed into a shared delusion? Perhaps George Lutz's interest in the occult, if true, somehow triggered poltergeist phenomena. Conversely, could the whole thing have been a calculated fraud to make money off a book and movie deal? Decades later, there is no definitive proof either way. We are left with only the Lutz's testimonies, the investigators' reports, and a few eerie photographs and recordings, none of which are conclusive. One thing is certain: the Amityville case profoundly affected those who lived through it, and even some who merely studied it. The Lutz children's lives were changed forever. Daniel Lutz, struggled with anger and trauma, later participating in a documentary, My Amityville Horror, 2013, to share his side of the story as an adult grappling with childhood fear. To this day, he dreams of that house and says he cannot escape its shadow. Kathy and George Lutz, until their dying days, insisted that whatever was in Amityville followed them after they left, suggesting that dark force wasn't just tied to the house, but perhaps to them as well. They reported paranormal activity even in the house they moved to next, though on a much smaller scale. Ed and Lorraine Warren similarly carried Amityville with them as a haunting memory. Lorraine said she never again experienced such an extreme malevolence at home. On the flip side, the Cromarty family found the whole affair deeply upsetting, not due to ghosts, but due to the unwanted fame it brought their quiet life. They fought to restore the reputation of their village, Amityville, which they felt had been unfairly maligned by what they termed a hoax. They too were affected, having to deal with trespassers, gawkers, and media for years. Thus, whether one believes in the paranormal or not, the story of the Amityville Horror had very real consequences. Conclusion: the House of Horrors remains an enigma. In the end, the Amityville house keeps its secrets. The stately home still stands at Ocean Avenue, renovated and repainted,
with new families making new memories inside. By day, it looks like any other upscale suburban dwelling, not outwardly betraying the dark lore attached to it. But as night falls and the windows glow softly, one might recall those famous quarter-moon windows that once looked like malevolent eyes watching. One might imagine the echoes of that terrible November night in 1974 when the halls rang with gunfire, or the cold January nights when the Lutz family huddled together in terror from an invisible threat. Is the Amityville Horror real, or is it an elaborate myth? After all the investigations, lawsuits, books, and films, we still lack a clear answer. Perhaps the true horror of Amityville is this lingering uncertainty, the notion that we can never fully comprehend what happened within that house. The Amityville case remains an enigma, a modern ghost story that refuses to die, continually haunting our culture with the possibility that pure evil might reside where we least expect it, even in a cozy family home on a quiet American street. As we close the chapter on 112 Ocean Avenue, the final image lingers. A family fleeing into the night, pursued in their minds by something unspeakable. The darkened house behind them, falling silent once more. Whether that house was truly infested by demons or only by the shadows of human fear, we may never know for sure. And perhaps, as long as the story is told, the Amityville Horror will never truly rest in peace. A reminder that some mysteries remain, unsolved and undead, waiting for the next curious soul to knock on the door and step inside.